You look up at the night sky, and at first it doesn't feel real. The stars are too distant, too ancient, too impossibly vast for you to fully comprehend. Thousands of tiny lights scattered across an endless darkness, each one a sun, many older than our species itself. And yet somehow, despite all of that distance, they feel familiar, like something buried deep inside of you recognizes them. Maybe that's because, in a very literal sense, you belong to them. Every atom in your body was forged in the heart of a star. The calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, the oxygen in your lungs, all of it was born in cosmic furnaces billions of years ago, long before the Earth ever existed. Every atom inside you traveled across the universe for unimaginable stretches of time. And then, for one brief moment in cosmic history, the universe arranged itself into something capable of looking up at the stars in awe. The universe became you. This is the philosophy of Baruch Spinoza, the idea that you, me, every living thing are not separate from the universe, but expressions of it. That consciousness itself is the cosmos becoming aware of its own existence, and that there is no God watching over the universe, but the universe itself is God. In 1929, a rabbi sent Albert Einstein a telegram asking a simple question: "Do you believe in God?" Einstein replied with a sentence that would echo through philosophy, science, and religion to this very day. He said, quote, "I believe in Spinoza's God, who reveals himself in the lawful harmony of what exists, not in a God who concerns himself with the fate and actions of human beings." Baruch Spinoza was born in Amsterdam in 1632, during a time when Europe was consumed by religious conflict and intellectual upheaval. His family were Sephardic Jews who had escaped Portugal during the Inquisition, a time when Jews were tortured, executed, and forced to convert to Christianity. Amsterdam became a refuge for these displaced communities, one of the few places in Europe where they could practice their faith with relative freedom. The Jewish community there was tightly bound together by shared trauma and survival. Religion was not simply belief, it was identity, protection, and continuity. To challenge it was to threaten the fragile structure holding the community together. Spinoza grew up immersed in this world. He studied Hebrew scripture, Jewish philosophy, and religious law. By all accounts, he was brilliant, quiet, and deeply curious, so much so that everyone around him expected he would become a rabbi. But sometime in his late teens, he began to ask dangerous questions. He wanted to know whether scripture should be interpreted literally. He questioned whether God truly intervened in human affairs. He doubted the existence of miracles. He wondered if the soul was really immortal. Today, these might seem like just abstract academic debates, but in the 17th century, these were ideas that could destroy your life. What made Spinoza especially threatening was that he did not merely reject religion in the conventional sense. He dismantled the entire framework beneath it. Most people at the time imagined God as a supreme ruler, standing outside of the universe, guiding history like a king governs a kingdom. God created the world, judged human behavior, rewarded virtue, punished sin, and listened to prayers. Spinoza looked at this image of God and concluded it was nothing more than humanity projecting itself onto the cosmos. Humans imagined God as a giant version of themselves because they could not conceive of reality in any other way. For Spinoza, the universe did not revolve around human desires, fears, or moral dramas. Nature followed laws. Everything unfolded through necessity. The stars moved according to physical principles. Storms formed through atmospheric conditions. Human emotions emerged through chains of causes extending far beyond conscious awareness. There was no divine hand suspending the laws of reality whenever humans demanded special treatment. This was an almost impossible idea for his contemporaries to accept because it shattered the comforting structure of existence. If God does not intervene, then suffering is not part of some cosmic moral narrative. If miracles do not exist, then nature is indifferent to prayer. If humans are not uniquely favored by creation, then we are not the center of reality. Spinoza forced people to confront a universe that operated independently of human wishes. Yet strangely, his philosophy was not cold or nihilistic. In fact, many people who read Spinoza describe the opposite reaction. They experience an overwhelming sense of connection. Because if God is not separate from nature, then every living thing becomes part of the same infinite process. The boundary between self and the universe begins to dissolve. You are no longer a lonely creature trapped in a hostile cosmos. You are an expression of the cosmos itself. This is why Spinoza has fascinated such radically different thinkers across history. Hegel said, quote, "You are either a Spinozist or not a philosopher at all." Nietzsche admired his rejection of free will and divine morality. Freud saw traces of psychoanalysis in Spinoza's understanding of hidden motivations. Even modern neuroscientists and physicists continue to find parallels between Spinoza's vision and contemporary understandings of the interconnected systems in the cosmos. But in Spinoza's own lifetime, these ideas made him one of the most hated men in Amsterdam. At just 23 years old, the Jewish authorities issued the harshest excommunication decree in their community's history. The document is shocking even today. It cursed him by day and by night, forbade anyone from speaking to him, helping him, reading his writings, or even standing within a certain distance of him. He was completely erased from communal life. There was no path for him for forgiveness, no chance for reconciliation. His family was expected to abandon him entirely. Imagine what that meant in the 1600s. Excommunication was not merely social embarrassment or cancel culture the way we think of it today. It was psychological annihilation. Your community was survival. To lose it meant isolation, poverty, and vulnerability. Spinoza lost his entire world because he refused to stop asking questions. And yet, even after all of that, he never responded with bitterness. He quietly left the community, earned a modest living grinding lenses for microscopes and telescopes, and devoted the rest of his life to philosophy. He lived simply, rejected fame, and published many of his works anonymously because he knew how dangerous his ideas were. Assassination attempts were not uncommon for people accused of heresy. At one point, a religious fanatic even tried to stab him in the street. But Spinoza kept writing because he believed humanity suffered from a profound misunderstanding about reality. People believed they were separate from nature, separate from one another, separate from God, and from this illusion emerged fear, superstition, hatred, and endless conflict. His goal was not simply to criticize religion, it was to replace humanity's entire understanding of existence with something radically different. A vision where the universe was one unified substance expressing itself through infinite forms. A reality where every human being, every animal, every plant, and every star were interconnected manifestations of the same eternal process. And at the center of this vision was one revolutionary phrase: Deus Sive Natura, God or nature. At first glance, the phrase sounds poetic, almost harmless, but in the 17th century it was a philosophical dynamite, because Spinoza was not saying that God created nature or that nature reflected God's beauty. He meant something far more radical, that God and the universe are literally the same thing, one reality, one substance, one infinite existence expressing itself in endless forms. To understand why this idea was so revolutionary, we have to understand the worldview that Spinoza inherited. For most people in Europe at the time, reality was divided into separate layers. God existed above the universe as a transcendental creator. Human beings existed below him as independent souls inhabiting material bodies. Nature itself was treated almost like a machine built by divine hands. There was God, there was humanity, and then there was the physical world. Spinoza looked at this separation and believed that it made no sense. He asked a deceptively simple question. If God is truly infinite, then how could anything exist outside of God? If something exists independently from God, then God would no longer be infinite because there would be something beyond him. Just pause and think about that for a moment. Once you imagine reality as being divided into separate entities, you create boundaries. And boundaries imply limitation, which negates the existence of an infinite being. So, Spinoza arrived at a very startling conclusion. There can only be one infinite being in existence, one infinite reality that contains everything within itself. That single substance is what some people call God, while others call it nature. The two words describe the same thing, just from different perspectives. This idea became known as substance monism, the belief that beneath all apparent diversity, reality is fundamentally one. Think about the ocean. On the surface, you see waves rising and falling, each appearing separate from the others. One wave crashes violently against the shore, while another moves gently through open water. But none of them are truly independent things. Every wave is simply the ocean expressing itself in temporary forms. For Spinoza, human beings are like those waves. You feel separate because your mind draws boundaries around your body, your thoughts, your memories, and your identity. But those boundaries are conceptual. In reality, you are inseparable from the infinite network of causes and processes surrounding you. And we can see this quite literally at play. Every breath you take depends on trees and oceans. Every thought emerging in your mind depends on language, biology, history, culture, and physical laws extending back billions of years. Your existence is not self-contained. It is an expression of the entire universe unfolding in one particular form. Spinoza believed everything that exists is part of the same eternal substance expressing itself through different modes. A mode is essentially a temporary modification of reality, a particular pattern within the whole. Humans are modes. Animals are modes. Galaxies, modes, clouds, forests, planets, memories, and civilization are all finite expressions of the same infinite substance. This also changed how Spinoza understood the mind and the body. For centuries, philosophers struggled with the relationship between consciousness and matter. How can thoughts exist in a physical universe? How does an immaterial soul interact with a material body? Descartes famously argued that mind and body were separate substances, but even he couldn't fully explain how these two fundamental different realities could still affect one another. Spinoza rejected the problem entirely because he rejected the separation beneath it. He argued that mind and matter are not different substances. They are different attributes of the same underlying reality. Humans can perceive reality through two primary attributes, thought and extension. Thought refers to consciousness, ideas, and mental experience. Extension refers to physical matter occupying space. But these are simply two ways of perceiving the same substance. Imagine looking at a coin from two angles. One side appears different from the other, but both belong to the same object. In the same way, every physical event has a corresponding mental aspect because mind and matter are parallel expressions of one underlying reality. Your thoughts are not floating outside of nature, they are nature. This is one reason Spinoza feels strangely modern. Neuroscience increasingly reveals how thoughts, emotions, and decisions emerge from physical processes in the brain. It's not ephemeral the way we once thought it was. Psychology shows how deeply human behavior is shaped by causes outside of conscious awareness. Ecology demonstrates how interconnected living systems truly are. Again and again, modern science moves away from describing things as isolated substances and towards interconnected processes. Spinoza anticipated this centuries earlier through pure philosophy. He even distinguished between two dimensions of nature itself. He called them Natura naturans and Natura naturata. The first means naturing nature. This refers to the active, eternal processes generating reality, the infinite laws and forces through which existence continuously unfolds. The second means natured nature. This refers to all the finite things produced by those processes, that is, trees, rivers, stars, animals, you and me. In modern language, you could think of it as the difference between the underlying code of reality and the temporary forms emerging from that code. The important point is that nothing stands outside of this system. There is no supernatural realm interrupting nature from above, no external creator stepping in to suspend physical laws whenever humans demand miracles. Everything follows necessarily from the structure of reality itself. For Spinoza, this necessity was not oppressive, it was beautiful. Most people experience reality as chaotic because they only see fragments of it. They judge events according to personal desires and fears. When something benefits them, they call it good. When something harms them, they call it evil. But Spinoza believed these categories reflected human perspective rather than any kind of objective truth. From the viewpoint of the universe itself, everything unfolds according to necessity. The stars explode, species evolve, civilizations rise and collapse. Human beings fall in love, they suffer, they create art, they wage war, and they die. And none of these are interruptions in reality. They are reality expressing itself through infinite transformations. This perspective changes something fundamental about human identity. You stop seeing yourself as an isolated ego dropped into an alien universe. Instead, you begin seeing yourself as a localized expression of the same forces shaping everything else. The atoms inside your body were forged in ancient stars. The oxygen in your lungs was breathed by countless organisms before you existed. Your consciousness emerged from evolutionary processes stretching back billions of years. The boundary between you and the universe becomes harder and harder to define. And this is precisely why Spinoza terrified religious authorities. Because once God becomes identical with nature, the personal God of traditional religions begins to disappear. The God that most people worship is deeply human. He listens, judges, rewards, punishes, loves, gets angry, forgives, and intervenes. Traditional religion imagines the universe as a moral drama centered around humanity. Spinoza dismantled all of it. God doesn't love you, but hey, neither does he hate you. He has no emotions because emotions imply change, and change implies imperfection. A being who becomes angry or pleased is reacting to events outside of themselves. But for Spinoza, God is infinite reality itself. Nothing exists outside him to provoke those emotional reactions. To Spinoza, God has no preferences, no chosen people, no divine plans for nations or individuals. The universe doesn't revolve around human morality. Nature follows laws with absolute consistency, whether humans approve of the outcomes or not. The more I read about Spinoza, the more I feel like he honors the idea of God more than most religious people I've met who treat God like some random genie who grants wishes. Some of these religious people in his day condemned him as the prince of atheists who was secretly trying to destroy religion itself. But people who actually read him had the opposite reaction. Instead of eliminating spirituality, Spinoza transformed it into something vast and impersonal. The Romantic poet Novalis called him the God-intoxicated man because there is something spiritually overwhelming about Spinoza's vision of reality. Instead of imagining God as a distant ruler watching the universe from above, Spinoza dissolves that distance entirely. Every star has suddenly become divine. Every living thing becomes an expression of the infinite. The laws of physics themselves become sacred because they are the structure of God's existence. In Spinoza's universe, there is no separation between the spiritual and the material world. Reality itself is holy. This is why Einstein admired him so deeply. Einstein rejected the idea of a personal God who interfered with nature, but he felt profound awe toward the mathematical harmony of the cosmos. For Einstein, this cosmic intelligibility inspired something close to religious reverence. I think Spinoza would have understood that perfectly. But his philosophy still came with devastating implications for traditional beliefs. There are no miracles in Spinoza's universe because miracles would require God contradicting his own nature. Religious traditions often define miracles as suspensions of natural law: water turning into wine, seas parting, the dead returning to life. But Spinoza argued this idea makes no sense. If the laws of nature are expressions of God's essence, then violating them would mean God acting against himself. Nature cannot break its own laws because those laws are what nature is. When people describe miracles, Spinoza believed they are actually describing events whose cause they simply do not understand. Human ignorance creates superstition. Ancient people saw lightning and imagined divine anger because they lacked scientific explanations. The less people understand nature, the more they project intention onto it. This also transformed his view of prayer. Most religious prayer assumes God can be persuaded to alter reality according to human desires. Like I said earlier, a genie. People ask for victories in war, protection from disease, financial success, or the recovery of loved ones. But for Spinoza, asking God to suspend the necessary order for personal profit reflected a profound misunderstanding of existence. He saw this kind of prayer as a form of narcissism, humans imagining the infinite structure of reality rearranging itself to please their individual wishes. And yeah, that does sound harsh, but Spinoza's goal wasn't cruelty. He believed humans suffered because they misunderstood their place within nature. People cling desperately to fantasies of control because reality feels uncertain and frightening. Religion often comforts this anxiety by promising cosmic justice and divine protection. But Spinoza thought genuine peace could only emerge through understanding reality as it truly is. And reality, in his view, was governed entirely by necessity. Every event emerges from prior causes extending infinitely backwards through time. A storm forms because atmospheric conditions produced it. A war occurs because of political tensions, economic pressures, psychological motivations, and silly, stupid humans. Spinoza believed wisdom begins when you stop viewing yourself as separate from nature and start understanding yourself as part of an infinite process. At the center of this process lies one of the most important concepts in his entire philosophy: conatus, the drive of every living thing to persist in its own existence. Every living thing struggles to continue existing. Plants stretch their way towards sunlight. Animals fight for survival. Humans pursue security, recognition, love, power, pleasure, meaning. Beneath the complexity of civilization, philosophy, and culture, there is a deeper movement driving life forward, a fundamental tendency to persist, to expand, and to express itself. Spinoza called this force conatus. The word is difficult to translate directly because Spinoza meant something broader than a simple survival instinct. Conatus is the essence of a thing to strive to remain what it is. A tree pushes its roots deeper into soil. An animal avoids danger. A human being seeks experiences that strengthen their existence and avoids those that diminish it. For Spinoza, this striving is not something added onto life, it is life itself. You don't simply possess conatus as one feature among others. Your desire to continue existing is the very structure of your being. Basically, every living thing expresses itself through continuous existence. This is why emotions occupy such a central role in Spinoza's philosophy. Emotions aren't random spiritual disturbances or moral failings, they are signals reflecting changes in our power to exist and act. Joy emerges when something increases our vitality. Sadness emerges when something weakens it. Love is the experience of connecting joy to an external cause. Hate is the opposite. Spinoza approached emotions almost scientifically, treating them as natural phenomena governed by understandable laws rather than mysterious forces descending from an outside reality. This was revolutionary at the time because most moral systems before him framed emotions in terms of sin, of virtue, or spiritual strength or weakness. Anger, lust, envy, fear were treated primarily as moral failings. Spinoza saw them differently. He believed emotions followed causal chains, just like weather systems or biological processes. If someone lashes out in anger, that anger did not come from nowhere. It came from prior experiences, from insecurities, from environmental triggers, from physical conditions and psychological associations. Understanding those causes matters more than condemning the person morally. Again, Spinoza shifts the focus from judgment to understanding. But this raises a disturbing question. If every human action arises through prior causes, then what happens to free will? Well, Spinoza's answer remains one of the most worrisome ideas in philosophy. He believed free will, at least in the absolute sense that people imagine it, doesn't exist. Humans feel free because they experience desires internally while remaining unaware of the countless causes shaping those desires. Spinoza gives a famous example. Imagine a stone flying through the air after someone throws it. If the stone were conscious, it might believe it was freely choosing to move forward. It would experience motion while remaining unaware of the external forces determining its path. You think you freely chose your ambitions, your beliefs, your attractions, your fears, and your opinions, but look closely, and those choices begin dissolving into influences that you never consciously selected for yourself. You didn't choose your genes. You didn't choose the culture you were born into. You didn't choose your early childhood experiences, your language, your nervous system, the historical moments that shaped your life, or the social forces currently shaping your perception of reality. Every experience alters your brain and influences future decisions. Experiments repeatedly show that brain activity associated with decisions often happens before the conscious awareness of choosing. Much of what humans call free choice appears deeply conditioned by processes outside of our awareness. Spinoza saw this centuries before brain scans existed. But his philosophy was never meant to trap humanity in fatalism. He wasn't arguing that life is meaningless because everything is determined. In fact, he believed that understanding causation was the path to freedom. A person consumed by rage feels powerful in the moment, but Spinoza would say they are deeply unfree. Their emotional state controls them completely. The same applies to greed, obsession, tribal hatred, and compulsive behavior. When external circumstances dictate your internal state, you are being acted upon rather than acting from understanding. Spinoza distinguished between passive emotions and active understanding. Passive emotions dominate us when we do not understand their causes. Imagine someone insults you online, and your entire day becomes consumed by resentment. Your mind loops endlessly around that event. You replay the argument internally. Your emotional state depends entirely on something outside of your control. In Spinoza's terms, you are experiencing passive effects. Your internal condition is being determined externally. But understanding changes this dynamic. The moment you begin seeing the causes behind human behavior, emotions become less personal. You recognize that the person insulting you was shaped by their own insecurities, experiences, fears, and social conditioning extending beyond the immediate moment. Their actions become understandable rather than purely malicious. And this doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it transforms your relationship to it. Understanding dissolves hatred because hatred depends on imagining people as freely choosing evil independent of root causes. Spinoza believed that once humans truly understood the forces shaping behavior, compassion would emerge naturally. This perspective radically alters our concept of morality. Most traditional morality revolves around blame and punishment. People are divided into good individuals deserving reward and bad individuals deserving condemnation. Spinoza rejected this framework because it assumes humans exist outside of causality. Instead, he believed ethical life should focus on increasing understanding, cooperation, and human flourishing. A healthy society wouldn't be built primarily on fear of punishment. It would be built on knowledge of human nature and camaraderie. Imagine being caught in a violent current without understanding the ocean. You panic because events feel random and uncontrollable. But a skilled sailor who understands tides and weather patterns navigates the same waters differently. The laws of nature haven't changed or disappeared, but knowledge creates the power to shape your reaction to adversity. This is Spinoza's idea of freedom. Freedom is not existing outside of the universe's laws. Freedom is aligning yourself consciously with reality rather than fighting blindly against it. The more adequately you understand yourself and the world around you, the less you are dominated by confusion and destructive emotion. You become capable of responding rationally rather than reacting compulsively. This transformation leads towards the highest form of human existence Spinoza could imagine. A state where the ego loosens its grip entirely, where the self begins seeing reality from the perspective of eternity itself. Spinoza believed there was a way of seeing reality that could fundamentally transform human existence. He referred to it as under the aspect of eternity. Most people experience life from an intensely narrow perspective. The human mind is trapped inside immediate concerns. Personal anxieties dominate your attention. Your daily frustrations feel enormous. Social conflict becomes all-consuming. The ego interprets every event in relation to itself. Someone criticizes you and it feels catastrophic. A plan fails and it feels like the universe is collapsing around your desires. Human beings instinctively place themselves at the center of reality. Spinoza believed this limited perspective is the source of much suffering. When you identify completely with the ego, life becomes an endless emotional storm. You cling desperately to pleasure because you fear pain. You become consumed by anger because you experience obstacles as personal attacks against your existence. Fear dominates because everything appears fragile and temporary. But Spinoza argued there is another way of perceiving reality. Stepping back mentally until your individual life becomes part of a vastly larger process. You begin seeing humanity itself as one expression of nature among countless others. You see civilizations rising and falling across history. You see ecosystems evolving over millions of years. You see stars forming from collapsing clouds of gas and exploding into elements that later become living organisms. You realize your body is composed of matter older than the earth itself. Instead of experiencing yourself as an isolated creature fighting against reality, you begin experiencing yourself as part of reality unfolding. Your existence becomes one temporary expression of an infinite process stretching far beyond individual identity. This shift wasn't meant to produce passivity or indifference, no, quite the opposite. Spinoza believed it could free people from destructive emotional patterns and allow them to live more rationally, compassionately, and joyfully. Because when you stop interpreting everything through the narrow lens of ego, hatred becomes much harder to sustain. Most hatred depends on rigid separations between the self and the other. You see another person as fundamentally alien, threatening, or morally corrupt. But Spinoza's philosophy dissolves those boundaries. Every person becomes an expression of the same underlying reality shaped by causes extending far beyond our conscious control. The person you envy, fear, or despise is another mode of the same infinite substance that you are part of. Again, this doesn't mean abandoning moral judgment entirely or tolerating harmful behavior. Spinoza wasn't arguing that suffering and injustice are mere illusions. He understood human cruelty deeply, but he believed understanding the causes behind human behavior creates the possibility of compassion without naivete. This is why Spinoza placed such enormous importance on reason. Today, reason is often imagined as cold logic detached from emotion, but for Spinoza, reason was deeply connected to emotion. The more adequately you understand yourself and reality, the more capable you become of acting rather than merely reacting. And this leads to one of Spinoza's most beautiful ideas: the intellectual love of God. At first, the phrase sounds religious in the traditional sense, but Spinoza means something almost entirely different. The intellectual love of God is the joy that comes from understanding reality itself. It is the emotional experience of perceiving the universe's interconnectedness clearly. It's the feeling that you get when you look up at the night sky, far away from the city lights, staring up at the Milky Way, or standing before an incredibly vast mountain range, or hearing music so beautiful it temporarily suspends your inner monologue and transports you to a different world. Or discovering scientific truths like the golden ratio, quantum mechanics, or string theory that explain the world in strangely unique yet beautiful ways. These experiences often produce a feeling that is difficult to describe: awe, wonder, a strange combination of insignificance but incredible meaning and connection. The ego shrinks, but existence feels larger and more meaningful at the same time. Spinoza believed this feeling could become a stable way of relating to reality through philosophical understanding. The more deeply you comprehend the interconnected structure of existence, the more you participate consciously in the infinite whole. And this participation generates joy because your mind aligns with reality rather than resisting it. In many ways, Spinoza transformed spirituality into understanding. There are striking parallels here with Eastern philosophies, even though Spinoza developed his ideas independently. In Advaita Vedanta, the individual self is ultimately identical with the universal consciousness underlying reality. In Buddhism, suffering emerges through attachment to the illusion of a separate ego. Taoism emphasizes harmony with the natural flow of existence rather than resisting it. Spinoza arrives at similar conclusions through rational philosophy rather than meditation or mystical revelation. And this may explain why his ideas continue feeling so modern. The more I researched him for this video, the fresher his ideas seemed to me. This sounds like the exact kind of message we need in today's world. In the centuries since his death, science has repeatedly revealed deeper layers of interconnectedness within reality. Ecology shows that organisms cannot exist independently from environmental systems. Quantum physics and spooky action at a distance shows that there are particles that can be far from each other and unconnected via space, but will still be interconnected. Neuroscience reveals how constructed yet fluid personal identity truly is. Cosmology shows that every atom in your body originated in ancient stellar explosions. The deeper humanity looks into nature, the the harder it becomes to maintain the illusion of complete separateness. Carl Sagan once said, "We are a way for the cosmos to know itself." That sentence could almost summarize Spinoza's philosophy. You are not outside the universe observing it from a distance. You are one expression of the universe becoming conscious. The thoughts occurring in your mind are a part of nature reflecting upon itself. Human awareness emerges from the same reality that produces oceans, gravity, galaxies, forests, and stars. And yet, despite the beauty of this vision, Spinoza's philosophy never replaced traditional religion in the way some Enlightenment thinkers hoped. Because human beings don't live by ideas alone. Traditional religions survived not merely because they offered explanations about reality, but because they created rituals, communities, symbols, music, architecture, shared stories, and emotional belonging. They addressed grief, loneliness, mortality, and the need for collective identity. Spinoza offered humanity a breathtaking philosophical vision, but visions alone rarely satisfy the emotional needs of entire civilizations. Still, his influence quietly spread through history. He helped lay the foundations for the Enlightenment, secular democracy, freedom of thought, and the separation of church and state. His insistence that people should be free to think without persecution became central to modern liberal societies. Philosophers, scientists, psychologists, and artists continued rediscovering him generation after generation. Because Spinoza offers something increasingly rare in the modern world, a way of feeling spiritually connected to existence without abandoning reason. A vision where science and awe coexist, where humanity is neither the center of creation nor meaningless dust floating through emptiness. You are something stranger than either of those extremes. A temporary pattern within an infinite process, a fragment of the universe becoming aware of itself, and for a brief moment, through you, the cosmos opens its eyes. When Baruch Spinoza died in 1677, he left behind no church, no movement, no disciples marching through Europe carrying his message. There were no temples dedicated to his philosophy, no rituals built around his vision of the universe, no masses gathering weekly to celebrate the unity of existence. And yet, centuries later, his ideas survived while many of the authorities who condemned him faded into history. That survival says something important, because Spinoza understood reality in a way that humanity can never move on from. The modern world often feels psychologically fragmented. People experience themselves as isolated individuals disconnected from nature, from one another, and even from their own minds. Technology amplifies this feeling. Social media turns identity into performance. Consumer culture encourages endless comparison and dissatisfaction. Modern life surrounds people with stimulation while quietly eroding any stable sense of meaning or belonging. People are more connected technologically than ever before, yet loneliness and anxiety continue rising across the world. We possess immense technological power while remaining psychologically divided against ourselves. Political polarization fractures societies into hostile tribes incapable of understanding one another. Underneath all of these crises lies the same illusion Spinoza spent his life attacking, the illusion of separateness, the belief that humans stand apart from nature rather than within it, that individuals exist independently, that nations can pursue endless self-interest without consequence, that the ego is the center of reality. Spinoza offers no easy solutions to these problems. In fact, what he offers is extremely difficult. A vision where every living thing belongs to the same unfolding process, where understanding replaces hatred, where freedom emerges through knowledge rather than domination, where spirituality is found not in escaping the universe, but in recognizing your inseparability from it. And this doesn't mean passively accepting injustice or abandoning compassion. Spinoza strongly believed in improving human society. He defended democracy, freedom of speech, and intellectual liberty during a period when those ideas were genuinely dangerous. He believed understanding human nature could create more rational and humane political systems. But he also believed wisdom begins when humans stop imagining themselves separate from the rest of existence. And perhaps this idea matters now more than ever, because in a fragmented world, the idea that existence is fundamentally one carries enormous emotional power. You are not a disconnected observer floating through an alien cosmos. You are composed of ancient stars. Your mind emerged from the same universe producing black holes and oceans. The boundary between you and reality is thinner than you think. For a brief moment, the universe arranged itself into someone capable of asking questions about its own existence. Someone capable of wonder. Someone capable of looking up at the stars and realizing that the matter observing the cosmos is no different than the cosmos itself. You were never separate from the universe. You are the universe experiencing itself. Deus Sive Natura, God or nature. This idea that the universe and the divine are not separate beings, but one and the same. It might sound crazy at first, but honestly, the more I've learned about the universe through math, science, and code, the more that idea has started to feel strangely real. There's a certain feeling you get when you truly understand something for the first time, and it comes with this genuine sense of awe. I used to think that I wasn't a math person, like certain ideas were just beyond me. But over time, I realized the problem wasn't me, it was just the way I was taught. Most learning makes you passively consume information instead of actively engaging with it. And when you have a classroom with one teacher handling 30 students, it becomes even more difficult to fully engage with these concepts. This is why I have genuinely loved using Brilliant, the sponsor of today's episode. Brilliant was already my favorite way to learn complex topics, but they've taken it even further with their new super intelligent personal tutor for math and coding. It feels much closer to having an actual private tutor sitting right there beside you, guiding you through the lessons. It can see what you're doing. It will guide you through problems visually, draw diagrams, ask questions, and adapt to how you think in real time. And because you are constantly interacting with concepts directly, difficult subjects start feeling surprisingly intuitive. Whether it's algebra, calculus, logic, coding, or AI concepts, Brilliant makes learning feel engaging in a way traditional classrooms rarely do. You stop feeling like you're memorizing disconnected facts, and you start feeling like you are actually becoming a better problem solver in real time. I cannot recommend Brilliant enough, and this new tutor just makes it perfect for everyone, especially for beginners and for young people. To try Brilliant's new tutor for free, scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the description. And if you upgrade to Premium, you can unlock all courses and save 20% off an annual subscription by going to brilliant.org/aperture.